family?
How many siblings you got?
I have three siblings. But I mean, if we're talking about like my mom has 17 siblings, so
Holy cow, okay.
yeah,
The
Which,
Thanksgiving and family gatherings must go wild.
it's really rough. I mean, we barely fit in the house, so
hey there, welcome back to the As I Understand It podcast, the discussion podcast about careers, young adulthood, and the evolving world we live in. I'm your host, Cameron Geddes. Graham.
I'm your co-host, Graham Nesbitt.
And today's episode features my longtime friend and neighbor, Tiffany Christianson. If you want to say hi, Tiff.
yeah. My name is Tiffany Christianson. I do have an undergrad in biology, and I'm currently pursuing a master's in teaching while I work at East High School in Rockford, Illinois.
Thanks, Tiff. I'll say a few words about myself just for people new to the podcast. My name is Cameron Geddes. I'm 24, and I graduated from Hope College in May of 2021 with degrees in economics and global studies. I'm currently employed as a food service data analyst with the market research firm Circana. Graham, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, once again, Graham Nesbitt, graduated from Wheaton College in 2021. Since then, I've been working as an addiction counselor in the Rockford region.
Nice. Thanks, Graham. All right, we'll get into our first topic of the day, and I will let Tiff lead this one. The topic is, what can the American education system do to teach biology better? So I've got a stat here on that. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 46,200 biological scientists worked in the country as of May 2020. The majority of biologists worked for the government or with scientific research and development services at that time. In 2020, the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimated that biological scientists earned an annual median salary of $85,290. An average outlook of 4% growth year over year was expected from 2020 to 2030, according to, again, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So obviously very strong outlook and very high, median salaries expected for people studying biology. But we've talked a little bit, three of us before, that biology is kind of struggling right now as an educational topic in schools. So, I'll have Tiff go first discussing that as she's getting her master's in biology.
Yeah, so the question is like, how can we improve kids learning about biology, right? Or just like science in general. And to take it in another direction, what's more important than like having knowledge about biology or sciences in general is being able to think scientifically. People like it's just like a common theme where people are unable to think scientifically or think critically. I like to think about how one of my professors put it. We're in an era of information. We're so able to just pick up our phone and look up anything we want, 30 years ago, we weren't able to do that. So it was important to have like information in our heads, right? But now that it's right at our fingertips, like it's more important to be able to discern good information from bad information because like while we're in the era of information, it can also be said that we're in the era of misinformation, especially with the rise in AI and things like that, and people not checking their sources. And there are studies done by real professionals, by real scientists, who do not do their due diligence, and
Mm.
the data that they collect just isn't, it's not good data. And we as individuals have to be able to parse out good information from bad information. Unfortunately, in schools, and this isn't just like with science, but like, every other subject, in my opinion, and even like in the real world, like we are unable to think critically and think scientifically and find good information and parse out the difference between data that is reliable and data that is not reliable. It's just like things with GMOs or things with vaccines, or pandemics, like lots of misinformation gets spread about those things, and there's a lot of fear mongering involved. And I believe like that kind of thinking starts in school when kids are not taught at a young age how to think critically or how to think scientifically and use inquiry and curiosity to figure out fact from fiction.
Yeah, no, those are great points, Steph. And I'll follow up with that. I think that there's, as you were saying, an abundance of information more than probably at any other point in history, really. And so much of it is very easily accessible and within reach, but via smartphones and cell phones. But I think there's a good point that you make that the information you might get from, Google or in the news or as kind of trending topics is going to be very different from information you might get from like a scientific journal or a textbook, or it's hard to kind of see the raw information and know what to do with it or even know where to find information like that versus information that has already been processed and is available because it's has some sort of swing to it, or it's being utilized by a news outlet to get across their perspective or their point, or through different YouTube or social media that can kind of degrade the quality of information even further. So I think what you're saying about having critical thinking skills is really important. Um, and I think that like with other subjects kind of in the education system, having a strong position on reinforcing students' natural curiosity and giving them the tools they need to, again, learn things about about climate change, again, about vaccines, GMOs, um, a lot of like um, it's things like that. I'm sure more will come to mind as we keep talking about it. But taking that natural curiosity and giving people the skill sets and the processes they need to go about it scientifically, yeah, it's very crucial.
Yeah. And like if you think about like curiosity and inquiry are so important. And I think about like as little kids, like didn't you guys were like, oh, weren't you guys like, why is the sky blue? Why is grass green? Like we had so much natural curiosity, and I really feel like the American education system kind of like maybe beats it out of us a little bit because we're
Mm.
told to sit down and listen, don't talk, like do your rote memorization and learn. And that honestly is like a lot of education right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Tiff, I got a question for you real quick, on
Sure.
the subject of curiosity and the state of learning right now. What kind of led you to being interested in the field that you're in right now?
Honestly, I started substitute teaching while I was working part-time with the DNR, like for an internship thing. And I don't know, I just really liked working with the younger generations and with kids. And I was like, I could really be good at this, because I already have a background in biology. Um, I don't know, they need a lot of help and I want to help them out. So that's kind of what I was like, yep, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get my master's.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yep,
Rest
it's
is
great.
history.
pretty much.
Graham, do you have anything to add on this question? Then I want to move on to the question that you had for today.
Yeah, I think Tiff about answered it all for that one.
Yeah, I agree. Good. Well, then I guess we can go on to our next question. What are some crucial elements of successful addiction recovery? So according to the AmericanAddictionCenters.com, which is a network of rehabilitation facilities across the U.S., they state that 46.8 million, or about 17% of Americans aged 12 or older, battled a substance use disorder in the last year. Genetics, including the impact of one's environment on gene expression, account for about 40 to 60% of a person's risk of addiction. So interesting that that kind of has the tie-in on biology through gene expression and environmental impacts. So it can kind of see the natural outflow of the previous question. Graham, if you want to respond first about crucial elements of successful addiction recovery.
Yeah, just touching up on that, statistic. Uh, Addiction is something that affects people in all walks of life, but a lot of it, something that comes up with a lot of it, is what's known as the biopsychosocial, biology. If you have a family member who is struggling with addiction or working through that, odds are there's going to be a higher chance that their children will face that as well. And social environments growing up, you have friends who are using, home environments also a factor in that. But that just goes into how a person experiences drugs, alcohol, kind of the beginnings of that. Once they're actually at the point where they want to get better, they want to go through recovery, I would say there's a lot of things that go into it, but for the purpose of the question, I might sum it down into one or two of the main ones. First important part of recovery is recognizing that it's not something that's meant to be done alone. Recovery is something that, by its nature, it's going to thrive best off of the support of other people who are also going through recovery. Some of the best ways and most accessible ways that someone could get the support of others, going to 12-step meetings. This could be Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or some of the bigger ones. There's also a wide range of other meetings for other addictive things that people are going through, such as, for example, Gamblers Anonymous. There's a new casino opening up in the Rockford region, so that's sure to be something that's coming up a lot. Um, in those 12-step meetings, there's something you can get called a sponsor. That's someone who has gone through recovery themselves and is someone who will kind of be alongside you in that. So having support going through recovery, a lot of people, especially when they're new to it, will not fully understand the nature of their addiction. They'll say, it's something I can stop. It's something they believe they can handle by themselves, and they'll keep trying that, and it will keep not working. And the breakthrough moment will be when they decide to put their trust in others and get the support from them. The second aspect of recovery that I would highly encourage is developing coping skills. There's going to be alcohol, for example, it's everywhere. It's in advertisements. It's sold at almost all establishments, and it's not going away. So avoiding alcohol in certain occasions is good. Staying away from it is good, but odds are you're going to come across it at some point in your recovery stage. So in those moments when the temptation is high and it's physically nearby, having ways that you can either remove yourself, avoid those kind of cravings or other stressors associated with it, also important. Either in that moment itself, that could be having a escape plan, having someone you could call. It could be your sponsor, family member, friend, to help you get out of that situation. Maybe just to talk on the phone for a few minutes to get you distracted from that, let you reset and go on with that. And also, stress is a large part of addiction and recovery. Finding ways to reduce stress at home, that could be having a peaceful environment. Having sober hobbies is also an important thing. Things that give you energy, that give you drive, things that stave off boredom, things that keep you motivated. Those would, I'd say, be some of the biggest parts of recovery. Having social support, having a good set of coping skills and coping mechanisms.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. And it's interesting that you mentioned that bit about how prevalent like alcohol advertising is. I'd never thought about that from the perspective of someone who had, if you were to have an alcohol addiction, like how prevalent that is. I think that speaks to broadly in our, in American society, like we have industries that cater to pretty much everything, and we have, a fairly relaxed policy on allowing people to access what they want. I know a lot of states have even decriminalized narcotics in certain forms, um, just because of, their view on like the legal aspect of it, the criminal aspect of it. And so I've never really thought about it from that perspective of how prevalent they are in advertising. And I think that even extends too to outside of alcohol, so to certain drugs and whatnot. It seems like we have, um, there's pharmacology for pretty much every need at this point. And there's pills for like weight loss, there's pills for, um, like ED, there's pills for all sorts of stuff nowadays that are available over the counter with a prescription. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who find out that they have these disorders even when they're, like given narcotics for going in for like injuries. If you've got a broken arm and they give you some opioids to help you through the pain management element of it, sometimes it's difficult to get off of those. And I'm a firm believer that everyone like deep down has an addiction to something. Like I think we're all just wired neurally in a different way to have some preference towards something that can be very difficult to break. And it can be a big struggle if you find out one day that you find something that you have an addiction to that you didn't know you had. So I think what Graham was saying about having support groups, about having sponsors, and having a strong social network to pull you out of that. Yeah, I think that's really key. And for anyone going through addiction, I think that's certainly the best place to start. Tiff, do you have anything to add on to that?
I do have a question. So, having a good social network and having people around you to like help you through it, like I feel like I've read like we have a lot of social isolation and stuff nowadays due to like social media and things like that. Do you have any idea as to whether or not like is that affecting people's ability to recover? Is it making like addiction worse? Things like that?
Um, yeah, on social media itself, I think maybe taking, part of the question, isolation being a big factor. Um, I might say for people who have not gone to any kind of support meetings before, people who have, maybe stayed at home, stayed isolated, that goes into the nature of addiction, itself. Addiction wants to keep someone isolated. It wants to keep them away from support, and there could be a wide amount of things that feed into that. But social media, being on the phones, and I would say when someone is drinking every day or using drugs, their esteem is probably not going to be at its greatest during those times. So getting to the meetings is going to be a difficulty in and out of itself. There is something that, of course, I would encourage in-person support meetings. I think there's something about meeting in person that can't really be replaced. But a good starting point, there are online 12-step meetings
Hmm.
for someone who has not gone to any one of those before and wants to see maybe what it's about. There are ones online that can be joined, and you can type in like AA meetings online or Narcotics Anonymous meetings online, and find those. So that is one plus side of the having the internet as compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, however.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great resource for people. The last question we'll get into for today are what are some data analysis practices you can use in other fields? So according to datacamp.com, which is an online site for learning data and programming skills, they cite that companies that make use of customer analytics are 23 times more likely to outperform their competitors in customer acquisition, 9 times for retention, according to McKinsey, which is like a consulting firm. In 2019, it was reported that only 27% of organizations, however, were able to make full use of their data to generate actionable insights, with the growing data skills gap cited as a primary reason. So I'll start on this question. I really think the growing data skills gap that kind of goes back to our initial question about failure of kind of failure of the workforce as a whole, or I guess like you could say as an outflow of education to have the critical thinking skills that are being demanded right now in the business world. I think that as personally as like as a data analyst, I've worked with a lot of wide variety of data sets. I've actually worked in more than just the food service because of how many industries Circana covers and some of the placements that I've had. And I've definitely seen a wide variety of with clients, and we have, they have a wide variety of introductions to working with data. Some of them are strictly using us essentially as a data provider. Other times we're forming more of a consultant role for them to help them through more particular and niche business questions they might have. So that's kind of a fun part about like my particular job is learning how they view data and what exactly we're supposed to be doing to assist them. So as far as what I would say, how to take some of like the skills that you might learn in a position or an industry like mine and apply them effectively to other things, I think there is a lot of crossover, believe it or not. There's a couple takeaways that can be useful for, again, if you're working in addiction recovery, or if you're working in biology, if you're working in teaching, if you're working in some of the industries that, previous guests we've had on that they're involved in. There's a lot of skill sets that are usable. So the three that stood out to me as really core data analysis um, skill sets or tools, one would be something called root cause analysis or 5 why analysis. And this is kind of a general critical thinking and problem solving technique. But it basically just means to be a badger about questions that you're given or problems that you're currently facing or your team is facing. So a classic one is of some like government building that is having to be power washed over and over again, every 6 months, and it's forming cracks in the pillars of it. So if you're say like, why is the government building have cracks all over it? Well, it's because it's getting power washed repeatedly. And like, why is it getting power washed repeatedly? Well, it's because there's birds that, nest and stuff on top of this building, and they defecate and get the pillars dirty and stuff like that. Like, okay, why are there more birds than they used to be? Oh, it's because um the the government building had its lights turned off at night, which I don't know if that, I'm kind of vaguely remembering this, but it's like, okay, then that allows birds to feel more comfortable nesting there. So then, they live there. So it's really, if you had just if you had really just stopped and said, oh, it's because they're power washing the building over and over again, so let's just stop doing that, you wouldn't get to the root cause of why you're having these issues. It really comes down to something that's several steps down the chain and say, okay, let's change the, the light sequence that is happening that's allowing the birds to live there. Like, let's, find some other home for the birds, like set up a bird's nest somewhere in a local park or something. So that's the main thing. It's just constantly being able to say, okay, yes, but why is that? And keep digging, even when people would previously be satisfied at one of those top line levels. I would also say too that model building is an important one. And like in my role specifically, that tends to be statistical models, which sounds very intimidating until you just learn how to make a few of them. It's not particularly excruciating if you have good data and you go about it in a pretty strategic way. But model building can really apply to things other than statistical models. It might be kind of like if-then logic and saying, okay, based on some client we've currently had and how they go about data, like what type of resources do they want? Do they bring in their own templates and formatting? Do they ask a lot of questions? That we really need to dig into, or are they going to be satisfied with our conclusions? So you can use that as a model for a client that you've never had before that is just now interested, or maybe based on how they go about their analysis, that can inform your marketing and advertising to get new clients. So that could apply even to things like if you were running a cupcake like stand or a bakery, you might build a model based on your current incoming customers and saying what they like, why they like it, what time of year they tend to shop, are they, you know, are they being attracted by discounts and so on. And you can apply that logic to people who have never been there and allow that to really inform your marketing and advertising. And so building models and just looking for places where you can build models, anything that can, any model you can build that's a reflection of reality that hasn't happened yet, is a useful skill. I think the last part that I would say is that really just fundamentally being able to turn business questions into analytical questions back into business solutions. So they might say, going with our bakery example, saying, okay, why are we not seeing customers on Friday and Saturday, right? That's a business question. You can turn that into an analytical question of, okay, let's track how many sales we're getting on different weekdays. And then, you might ask people who came in, like, oh, by the way, like, what else, is this time convenient for you? Do you want our hours to change and so on? You can create an analytical question that then says, okay, business wise, they want to come in Friday and Saturday, but we close too early. They're not getting off work until 5, but we close at 4 and so on. So that's what I have as far as like borrowing data analysis tools to help with other things. But, if you guys have questions or follow-ups, I'd love to hear them.
I really do love the first tool you talked about, I think, where it was like, okay, like why do we have to keep power washing this building? You know what I mean? And then you have to follow it like 8 steps down the chain to figure out the real cause. I feel like I don't know, I feel like that also ties into kind of what I was talking about
Yeah.
previously. Like it is just so important to be able to think, you know what I mean? And like use your analytical skills to like figure out real like quality solutions.
Yeah, I agree. Graham, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah. Just I think in general and throughout history, I know there's an example of there's some ruler who they had wanted they kind of in line with that thinking. They had looked at maybe one step of the process and ignored the things before. They had had some crops that had growing and wanted them to get rid of the animals that were eating the crops, and they did
Mm,
that, but that had a chain of effect that led to a great famine and killed a lot of people. So fully understanding a problem, taking a moment to look at the chain cause of events is huge.
yeah, I agree. Prevents a lot of those kind of spillover, like unintended consequences, you might say, in economics. Um, Yeah, well, I think that's all we've got for today. Thank you very much for watching, I guess slash listening if we can ever get Apple Podcasts working correctly. But I'd like to thank my co-host Graham and then my guest star Tiff Christianson. They've been, awesome to have on and always a pleasure to have conversations with these two. So that's it for right now. Thanks for listening, and you'll see us back in about 2 weeks. So until then, take care. See you.
Bye-bye.